"Oh no, no," he said, softly. Was there another way? Could they have not told his wife what they were doing? "Look," Sihrik said again. For Osrith was holding the queen at knife point. "Lady Eajifu, and her children are unharmed," Osrith called out to her brother. "Unharmed," she added, and pushed Bué closer to Eajifu and her eldest son. Edmund looked up to her, wide-eyed. He looked exactly like his father, and it hurt Osrith's eyes to look at him. She smiled, and gave him a tickle with her left hand. "Put the knife to my throat," Eajifu encouraged, and passed her the one she had been holding. "She says if you let her go, she will let me go," Eajifu called, piteously. "Let the queen go," Uhtred shouted to Osrith angrily. But Osrith shouted back in Danish that he was a piece of shit, that the rescue operation was going to fail, and she would never forgive him for sending Egil to her land. But then, Uhtred did something she did not expect. Although she should have. Beside his father, young Finan stood. Uhtred grabbed the boy and took out his seeks. "I will take your son's life," he threatened, and walked to the front of the rowing boat. Young Finan, to his credit, did not move, or cry out, and a pulse of pride crossed Osrith's chest. She could be no prouder of her son. "No god, Uhtred," said Finan, softly. But Uhtred had not finished yet, and he clapped his other hand on Finan's shoulder, smiling at his friend, a smile with no humor in it. "Everyone knows how good you are, my friend, to take on my whore of a sister's bastard," he told Finan. "Even more so when he's Constantine's. So now he dies for Alba." He looked back to Osrith. "A sort of justice there, sister? I think you have spoken the most words together in your life." Osrith spat. But Uhtred ignored the insult, and held up her son's head so she could see his neck. "But, I am thinking, is it a strange sensation?" Osrith mocked. Is he not of Edward?" There was a gasp. Eajifu, beside her, was looking carefully at Osrith now. "I know that you visited the king before the Battle of Totenholg. You begged the West Saxons to help. With what did you pay for that help?" He glanced at young Finan. "Or did he give you something for your trouble?" How did he know? Osrith thought. How did he know she had gone there? Then she thought, Ethelfled. He must have told Ethelfled that Osrith had visited, and Ethelfled must have told Uhtred. That was why they were with him. He wanted to isolate young Finan. He had his own heir. Now kill him, she told Uhtred, praying that God would tell young Finan that she was lying. "I tried to rid my body of him, but it was no use. He is Constantine's, and I have tried to love him." For a moment, Osrith thought she was going to see her son die. The son she had fought so very long and hard to protect, given so much to be at Alba, see grow into a strong, intelligent, pleasant person. Uhtred narrowed his eyes, then thrust young Finan away towards Finan. But he was not there. She inhaled. Of course Uhtred would send someone to stop her. It made sense to be her husband. Osrith saw his black hair over the side of the taffrail, but did not lower her sword when he approached them, and Finan saw the conspiratorial look between Osrith and Eajifu. "She is well and unharmed," Osrith called to her brother, "although she will have trouble walking on her right leg because I've chopped off 3 of her toes." "Oh," Eajifu said, after a short delay. The comedic effect broke the tension, and Osrith lowered Bué. Her anger was incandescent. How dare Uhtred use their son like that? When she finally got to young Finan, and got him on his own, she would ask him what it was he wanted to do with his life, even if she had to work as a sellsword to make it happen for him. In Alba, she would recommend. "I am sorry for your loss," Osrith said to Eajifu. The queen put her hand across Osrith's as she made to push Bué back into her scabbard. Her hand was soft, and there was only just a faint smell of lavender now. "And yours," Eajifu told her. "Be sure, you brought happiness to Edward." "Come on," Finan told Osrith, and she looked to him, seeing in his face a look of unhappiness. She believed she was going to make it worse. What was that for? She demanded to know of her brother, calling down to him as her brother's men climbed aboard, taking control of the ship, tightening her lines, putting her about. Young Finan glanced at his mother, but said nothing. She said nothing either. She felt they all should be lucky that she was not demanding to fight Uhtred there, on deck. As her brother got aboard, Uhtred hit the back of her head like an older child might a younger, but it was hard and she stumbled. Eadjafu's knife fell from her hands, and the woman looked at it on the deck. He took a step back when he saw Finan looking between them. Then, he held up a rope. Uhtred, please, I am begging you, Finan said, his voice low. Do not tow her up. Take her sword. But, no, Osrith said, insolence in her words. Tie me up. I mean you like to do that to people who are weaker than you. Ethelwold being dead now, I suppose you will settle for beating me yourself. Uhtred took a step towards her, but then cast down the rope. Instead, he took her shoulder and threw her to the stern of the ship. Stay here, he told her. But still Osrith was defiant. And you may keep your sword, you won't be able to use it. Young Finan, Osrith called to her son. Get the rope, bind my hands. Mother. Her son exclaimed, anything for his lordship. And she made to get the rope herself. When Finan stooped and picked it up, she stalked off to the back of the ship and sat on the planks, holding up her wrists, inviting the restraint. You don't have to do this, Finan told her as he knelt beside her. Osrith was glad that he didn't try to kiss her, because how she was feeling she might have turned away. I did not ask to be here, Osrith reminded him. Several hours later, and Sparrowhawk anchored not far off the North Sentish coast. Osrith watched as her brother, along with Finan and Berg, took the queen and her 2 children to her brother's estate. Finan had tried to speak to her, and had sat by her. Osrith conceded to ask whether he had heard about a plague in the north. A plague? Finan asked. I overheard it was in Lincoln. She pursed her lips. Had I been at Berwick? He leaned over and took her hands. He has a plan, Osrith, Finan told him, and you did not want to know it. I have heard nothing about plague, he added. A plan involving our son, and bringing him into hostile land when he has a potential claim to the throne of Wessex and Mercia. When Uhtred fights, of course, for Aethelstan. Potential claim? Finan repeated. Osrith hesitated. He knew that she had been with Edward, but that had been before she had fled with Edra. This was new, and she had never discussed it. Now, it had been thrust upon them by her brother. She began. But Finan held a finger to her lips. You cannot begin to know what I feel knowing that bastard Edward, and that equally bastardous shit on the throne of Alban he told her. But, Osrith, if you tell me now that there is no chance, think about it, Osrith asked. I do not want to think about it, Finan told her. I want to kill the bastards in their sleep. I have often thought of that. The last time I saw Constantine, she emphasized, it was almost a year before Tenhulg Edward. I saw him, as my shithead brother points out, about a week before that battle. Finan was silent for a time, but reached over her body to her stomach, remembering the swell of her stomach of a several months child. Then, he reached over and pulled Osrith close, and kissed her, as if it was the first time they had ever met. The first time when she had strayed a hand close to his, when she had put an arm on his, when he had put firm hands on her bare flesh. He is my kin, Finan told her, after breaking off reluctantly from their kiss. Your brother has a plan. He has given away our land, Osrith exclaimed. I don't trust me. And that was what she chose to do, for, as he moved from her, he ran his hand down her leg, and brought out Sainidstjan, the little, sharp needle of a knife that sat in a leather holder in her thigh, placing it in her hand and moving both her hand and the stjan under Osrith's leg. He did not back away and cast disparaging remarks to Osrith about being a bad wife or an untrustworthy lover. In fact, he said nothing at all, but gave her a long look. He seemed happier, and Finan sealed the plot with a kiss to her forehead, and then got to his feet, falling into Uhtred's side. And she watched, as the little boat they had used to get to Sparrowhawk got to the strand, and 3 figures got out. They were about half a mile from the coast. It was the work of a minute that Osrith cut through the rope. She might even have been as easy to wriggle her bonds free, except that her movements would have alerted Sihtric and Osferth. She stayed down, as if still bound, watching. Where is she? Uhtred asked, when he returned to 2 embarrassed, bemused guards. Osferth pointed towards shorn ropes. Uhtred looked, then rested his eyes on the water, where a figure was swimming in the warm, afternoon sunshine. And how did that happen? When he got no reply, Utad of Bibbenberg took to the wheel, ordering his men to ready Sparrowhawk. My sister, he murmured bitterly, as they rounded Sheppey and headed up tide towards Lundin. I let her go, Finan told him as the banks of the Thames narrowed and the stench of the city reached the ship. God help me, I let her go.